to this podcast, the Heidelminicast.
It's a Heidelminicast. And now, Scott Clark.
Why are particular Baptists so attracted to theonomy?
If the Heidelcast helps you, will you help us keep it going? Please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Allen Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
Well, I think you owe it to yourself to subscribe to the Heidelblog. Go to heidelblog.net/subscribe to the Heidelcast. You could do that in any podcast app. And then download the Heidel app. It's on the App Store and it's on Google Play. And it works. It's very elegant. Highly recommended.
The best podcast, the Heidelcast.
All right. We have here a text from Anonymous, who asks, why are particular Baptists, kudos to Anonymous for getting the title correct, it's particular Baptists. There's no such thing as Reformed Baptists. I know they think there are. They get upset when I say that there are not. I'm not saying Baptists don't exist. I'm not saying there are not predestinarian Baptists. And I'm certainly not saying there are particular Baptists. I'm trying to make particular Baptists great again. So that's what I'm trying to do. But there's no such thing as Reformed Baptists. It's a made-up category. It really doesn't exist until about 1990, maybe? Yeah, something like that. I've mentioned that before. You can go back and check that out. I've talked about it on the Heidelcast and talked about it on the Heidel blog. If you do an Ngram search, Google Ngram, and if you filter through the results, you'll see that there's a spike in the early 90s where people began talking about Reformed Baptists. And before that, you'll see the 19th century usages don't correspond to what we mean by Reformed Baptist. As I keep telling you, the earliest usage I have found is, I didn't find it actually. Somebody found it and sent it to me. Somebody anonymous. I said, hey, I'd like to give you credit for this research. And they said, no, they didn't. So what am I going to do? But I didn't discover this. Somebody discovered it for me and sent it to me. It was a newspaper article, very short blurb about a meeting of a Reformed Baptist group in, I think it was North Carolina, and I think it was 1823. It's in the footnotes in the article that I did in a collection of essays for which I'm looking. Oh, here it is. It's an expensive little volume. I'm sorry about that. I had nothing to do with that. The title of the volume is On Being Reformed, Debates Over a Theological Identity. It's a collection of essays by Matthew C. Bingham, Chris Coey, R. Scott Clark, Crawford Gribben, and the estimable D.G. Hart, and published by Palgrave Macmillan. It's a thin little volume, and we get it on sale sometimes. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit more than 89 pages plus an index. With the index, it is, 94 pages. Anyway, and they basically they charge $1. If you don't get it on sale, they charge $1 a page or something like that, close to that. It's really outrageous. But if you get it, and I don't remember getting paid for this. I'm certainly not getting anything for it now. If I ever did get paid for it, I might have. I don't remember. It wasn't much, obviously. Anyway, if you get it on sale, you can get it for as low as $30-some. So just, if you're interested, let me put that back. I'll lose it, and then I'll have to spend $90 to get it back. I don't want to do that. Okay, so why are particular Baptists so susceptible, Anonymous asks, to theonomy? What do you recommend for a lay church member in a church that has a few elders that take that view? Are there any good books in print that correct this viewpoint? Thank you in advance.
Heidelcast.
The answer to the questions is yes, yes, and yes, I think, if I remember correctly. First thing you should do is this. Go to heidelblog.net/resources and then hit, I think I do Control F on my Apple keyboards and just type in THEON and hit go. And that will take you to the resource page that brings up a whole hassle is the technical word we use. It's the technical word for lots of resources, a hassle of resources on theonomy, Christian Reconstructionism. There's a table of contents there where you can listen to podcasts, which is probably where I would recommend that you start. If you don't like reading, you can listen to the podcast. There's a whole series I did. I recorded Bob Strimple's replies to theonomy, his critique of theonomy, some historical background by John Meather, several episodes. These are very brief episodes, not very long at all. This is sort of how the minicast began, back when they were really actually minicasts, before they turned into almost full-sized sometimes. And we try to keep them at about 20 minutes if we can. Then there's Bob Godfrey critiquing theonomy. And then there's a whole series of episodes I did on post-millennialism. And then there's, I think, an interview too. And then in terms of printed stuff or written stuff, there's the RCUS position paper on theonomy. And I recommend, in terms of critiques, Barker and Godfrey edited a volume called Theonomy, A Reformed Critique. That is probably the place I would start. I think some of those essays are helpful, more helpful than others, but there's several very helpful essays in there. Then there is also a paper by Lig Duncan against theonomy, Moses for Modern Government. And then there's the PCA paper. And then there's a bunch of Heidelblog articles. Now, there are some background volumes that you could read. Which of those I recommend two, Crawford Gribbin's Survival and Resistance in Evangelical America. It's great background. He's being very neutral there and bordering on positive about the movement. I don't know that he is actually personally, but there's very little criticism of the movement in Gribbin. There's a little more criticism in Michael J. McVicker, Christian Reconstruction, R.J. Rushdoony, and American Religious Conservatism. So we're blessed with a couple of modern volumes. I'm less impressed with Julie Ingersoll's Building God's Kingdom Inside the World of Christian Reconstruction. It's more of a memoir than anything else. It's so personal for her because she did really grow up in the movement. So there's not a lot of even pretense of academic distance, critical distance. So it's interesting, but I don't find that nearly as helpful as the other two volumes. And then, as I say, there are a whole lot of essays on theonomy and quotations. One of the more valuable things about this resource page are the quotations on, for example, general equity, which the theonomists have completely bollocksed up, out of which they have made a mess. So there are some resources there, heidelblog.net/resources, and then look for the theonomy page. And that will get you started for dealing with this.
The Heidelcast.
Why then are particular Baptists so susceptible? That's a very interesting question. When I first encountered theonomy in 1980 or so, I was a young evangelical, just in the very early days of discovering the Reformed Confession. And I remember going to an ecclesiastical meeting, and there were some theonomists at the ecclesiastical meeting. And we were standing in line, and the fellow who was teaching me Reformed theology at the time, he was, I think, an associate pastor of this congregation, and he was working with the college kids, and I was one of those. And I was interested in ministry. And we were standing in the food line at an ecclesiastical meeting, and there was pork, and my buddy made a joke about this other fellow not eating pork, and I knew that, the days of not eating pork had been fulfilled. I had read the book of Acts, read chapter 10, so I knew that pork was okay to eat. Now you need to cook it so that you don't get ill, but otherwise it's morally fine. Morally indifferent. Anyway, I said, why doesn't he eat pork? And he said, well, he's a theonomist. Well, he was kidding. I don't think that fellow had any compunctions about pork. But I said, what's a theonomist? And he gave me a brief thumbnail sketch. So I was a political science, political philosophy student at the time. So I sat down to do some reading and discovered that there was this movement which sought to reimpose the Mosaic judicial laws. Never mind that the Westminster Confession explicitly says, and the Reformed explicitly confess, that the judicial laws expired with the state of that people, with the Israelite political entity, with the death of Christ. And never mind the fact that theonomy was invented by a essentially crazed Anabaptist. At least he was in his Anabaptist phase when he did it in the 16th century, and that it was denounced, the idea of a future earthly age, glory age, in which the Christians are triumphant and reimposing the Mosaic judicial laws, was condemned by the Reformed and the Lutheran churches in different confessions. Second Helvetic, written by Heinrich Bullinger, for the Reformed in about, I think it was probably written in 61, but published in 66. And the Augsburg Confession in 1530 denounces it, and Bullinger used basically the same language as the Lutherans. And Calvin, denounces theonomy, the idea that people want to bring back the Mosaic judicial laws. It is interesting that it comes from an Anabaptist with an over-realized eschatology, a vision of earthly conquest before Christ returns, an earthly glory age, and that's, of course, what the postmillennial theonomists are selling, right? So all theonomists are, and Reconstructionists are post-mill, not obviously all post-mill are theonomists or Reconstructionists. As to why the particular Baptists are so susceptible, I think it's because, this is just a hypothesis, I don't have any concrete historical evidence for this, but this is worth what you're paying for it, that the Baptists are the dominant expression of evangelical Christianity in the United States. And they have been since about roughly the early 19th century. And they think of this country, the United States, as their country. And I think they're gravely distressed at the state of the culture, state of politics, state of morality and ethics in the United States. And they want it fixed. They want to do something about it. And the Reconstructionists, the theonomists, the postmillennialists, the Christian nationalists, they're offering a solution. And I think a lot of particular Baptists have just glommed onto it without stopping to consider the history of these movements, the relationship of these movements to Orthodox confessional Reformation theology, and thinking particularly of the theonomy movement or theonomic movement and Christian Reconstructionism, which looks forward to a future collapse of civilization. Typically, they're thinking of the United States, and then out of that collapse will come this reconstructed Christian state in which the Mosaic judicial laws will be enforced by the magistrate when everyone has, or enough people have become converted according to their postmillennial eschatology, when we enter into an earthly glory age before Jesus returns. So they take the long view. They're like the Chinese communists in that respect. They're talking about 34,000 years. One of them, David Chilton, said, well, it's 1,000 generations. A generation is 40 years. That's 40,000 years. The earth is 6,000 years old when he wrote this. It's been a few years since he wrote this, about 40 years ago. So one generation, I guess, and according to his reckoning. So he said, I think it's, 36,000 years before Jesus returns. He actually said that. I think that's in his commentary on the Apocalypse. I know he wrote it, David Chilton, and I believe it's in his commentary on the Revelation. So that gives you a sense of the quality of the biblical exegesis of the movement. So I think, anyway, that's my psychological explanation. They think of this country as theirs, and they don't really seem to know the history of what has happened when the state has got hold of the church, or the state has used its coercive power to impose religion on a people, religious orthodoxy, and punished heterodoxy. Historically, that has not gone well for Baptists.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by Heidelberg Reformation Association.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidelmedia production.
The best podcast, the Heidelcast.